The tragic murder of Andrea Vazquez. Her name was Andrea Vazquez, and she was only 19, a regular Spanish girl living in California. She had friends whom she loved dearly, a close-knit family that was always there for her. She loved to crack jokes and make people laugh. She loved to dress nicely and take photos of herself. And like most other teenagers, she also had a boyfriend who loved her, and she loved him too. By all ramifications, she was a typical 19-year-old who couldn't hurt a fly. But there are some sick psychos out there who prey off innocence and would do despicable things to anyone, regardless of race or gender, and sadly, one of those people found her. On the 20th of August 2023, tragedy struck. While at a leisure park with her boyfriend, the couple heard gunshots. Few moments later, there was no trace of her, not the killer. She was simply gone, missing, with nothing but blood to signify that something terrible had happened. But what exactly happened on that day? Who shot at them? Why were they targeted? But most importantly, what happened to her? There have been over 600 shootings in the U.S. in the year 2023. Now, while this is a startling statistic, there is also a determined pattern with all these shootings: motive, and perhaps relationships. Most shooters have always carried out the act against another because of a clear motive. It could be money-driven, hate, or something else. There is also usually an established relationship between them. But this one caught everyone by surprise in ways that even the authorities couldn't explain. It was a little over midnight around the parking stalls of Penn Park, located at Penn Street in Whittier. Andrea arrived with her boyfriend, and the couple was simply looking to spend some quality time together. They had been there a few minutes when something terrible happened. From nowhere, they heard a gunshot, and their eyes widened when they came to a shocking realization. The shooter was aiming for them. There was only one thing to do. They had to run for their lives. Both of them opened the car door on either side and tried to make a run for it. However, outside the car, the shooter kept shooting sporadically and aggressively. A few moments later, the couple made it outside the car, but there was nowhere Andrea could make a run for it. It was almost like she was the one being targeted. Her boyfriend thought of what he could do. He could decide to fight the assaulter. But he couldn't beat a bullet, so he made the executive decision to do the next best thing: run and call for help. There was no time to think, only to act. So, without a moment's thought, he called out to her that he was going to get help and she should stay hidden. Andrea obviously did not like this, but she had no choice. So she waited as her boyfriend dashed out, cloaked by the shadows of midnight. Less than a minute later, true to his word, he returned to the scene with help. But what he saw made him rooted to the ground in raw, undiluted shock. There was absolutely no sign of Andreas, and even worse, when he got closer to the car, he noticed some blood smeared on the floor. Andrea's blood. So many theories ran through his head. Did she run away? Was she injured? Was she somewhere else needing his help? With the help of the others, he had called for help. They fanned out to look for his girlfriend. They called for her, searched the entire vicinity, but the sad reality of the situation dawned on him. Andreas had been kidnapped. She was missing, and so with a heavy heart, he called 911. When the police arrived on the scene, the boyfriend was both devastated and full of regret. As he was being consoled, the officers swung into action. First, they inspected the car and noticed the blood smeared around the scene. No one knew anything at all, but they could safely deduce that Andreas had been shot, and then taken away for whatever reason. The only question on everyone's mind, was she alive? Now, Andrea's had a big family, a loving mother, a present father, sisters and cousins, all of whom loved her very much. But later that day, they got the most devastating news of their lives. Andreas was missing, and no one knew whether she was dead or alive. When the news got to the media, it was broadcast on several channels, and the authorities let people know that they were searching for the kidnapper, or any news that could lead to finding young Andreas. People were divided on what they thought the outcome of the search would be. Some had no doubt that Andreas was dead, and the family should just give up. However, others held up hope that she would be alive and found. Either way, her family held on to that one shred of hope. They were sure that she was alive, and they were willing to do anything to get her back. The next couple of days were both grueling and emotional for them. They went on media round, pleading with people to come forward if they have any information. At one point, they even sent a direct message on live TV to whoever kidnapped their beloved Andreas. They were sure to let him know that they did not care who he was and why he did what he did. All they needed was to hold Andreas again, and she was all that mattered to them, so if he could return her, they would ask no questions. However, as heartfelt as that was, nothing happened for what seemed to be an eternity. No one heard anything. No one saw anything that might help. The situation was getting dire. It did not look good. But still, the family had hope that she would come back home. In the heat of the matter, to help with the investigations, the authorities needed to figure out who would do such a thing to Andreas. They needed to narrow down the suspects so they could get closer to solving the case. Whoever was capable of doing such a thing must know Andreas well. It did not seem like a random attack. It seemed premeditated. So, ex-boyfriend, or perhaps an ex-lover, or even a stalker. She was still really young, so that pretty much summed up the people in her life with enough motives to carry out such a sick endeavor. As a matter of fact, according to her 33-year-old sister Edlin, Andreas had a small circle of friends. She was loved by a lot of people and made no trouble. She was not even on bad terms with her exes. She stressed that she was very close with her missing sister, and if she had feared for her safety at any point in time, Edlin would be the first to know. But there was none of that, so it was really pulling what was going on. As you might imagine, the police were nowhere close to solving the case. The only hope of finding the kidnapper now was if Andrea's boyfriend had gotten a look at him long enough to be able to describe him. But the boyfriend told the police that he and Andreas had gotten out of the car when they heard the gunshots, and they had ducked. He had run towards a nearby couple for help, but they too were running away as well. And before he turned back around, Andreas was gone, and there were traces of her blood on the floor. It appeared a bit fishy, but even the police knew the boyfriend had no hand in this case. According to Andrea's family, as soon as they were told that she had been kidnapped, her elder sister tracked her phone and logged on to the location. They could see she was heading along the 60 freeway towards Riverside, but they were so far ahead, there was no way they could catch up. However, they kept following the signal till they got to the World Logistics Center Parkway in Moreno Valley, where they eventually lost the signal. However, as soon as they came out of the car, the sheer horror of what they saw froze them on the spot. There was blood everywhere, but still no sign of Andreas or her abductor. When the police had arrived on the scene, they had brought with them drones and canines to help in the search. They covered as much of the area as they could, called for Andreas, and did everything within their power to find her, but to no avail. The following day, they covered the areas again and searched everywhere. All the while, the Vazquez family held out hope that their daughter was alive. They believed she would be found and back in their arms still breathing, against all odds. But little did they know, they were in for the shock of their lives. After days of searching, it was on the 48-hour mark that the authorities discovered something on a vegetative field off Alessandro Boulevard and Merwin Street. It was just as they feared. Andrea's body, lifeless and dumped on the floor like a bag of trash. Again, the news of this tragedy sent a heavy blow to the family. They were both disappointed and deeply hurt. This was not the outcome they were expecting, and now they were determined to find the person behind this terrible attack. Just less than a day later, the police found a suspect. His name was Gabriel Sean Esperanza, and he was only 20 years old. He was believed to have abducted Andrea at gunpoint and shot at her, then took her to the field where he had tried to have his way with her and then left her for dead again. However, when the matter was arraigned and brought to court, Esperanza pleaded not guilty and the matter was adjourned for a full trial sometime later. But the craziest part about the whole story was that Esperanza had no affiliations or connection with Andreas. It was a completely random attack, and he had not known her previously. The question remains, why did he target only her then? What do you think? Let us know what you think in the comments.